Before anyone asks, let me just say that I'm going to stick this review into two parts. Part 1 will simply be me judging the film. Why? Because in my opinion, a movie should be judged simply as the film you're watching. Whatever it's based on, whatever it ties into, is immaterial. What matters is the film you are watching at that time. Part 2, however, I will go into how this compares to the original Death Note, positives and negatives, and that review will be full spoilers. This is going to be non-spoilers, so yeah, you've been warned. Okay, so Death Note 2017 follows Light Turner, yes, that is his actual name, as he magically winds up with a notebook that gives him the ability to kill people simply by writing their names in it. Sounds simple enough, sounds like it could be really interesting, right? Well, then we are introduced to every other plot element in this mess of a film. We're introduced to his girlfriend, who is maybe getting a little more into killing than he is. We're introduced to the demon who owns the book and maybe has some nefarious goals we never find out. I'm telling you that right now. We have the detective hunting Light and his incredibly all over the place, annoyingly exposition dumped backstory. We have pretty much this whole sort of concept of the world as it learns to worship Kira, but as interesting as that is, oh, Kira's his name as a killer, we can't really go into it because we have less than 2 hours, and we're going to cram as much stuff in this movie as possible. Did you think it would be impossible to cram 50 episodes worth of anime and just sort of chop it up, put it in a blender, and throw it on the wall and present it on screen? They did it, baby. This movie is... yeah, I know, you've probably heard by now, it's pretty bad. I'm not as negative to it as a lot of people are. I think there are some very good things in this film, but because of its choppy, all over the place nature, it really has no chance to do anything that interesting with it. For example, good element. Light has a different backstory from what he has in the source material. It's different, but I think it does create an interesting dynamic as to why he is the way he is in this film. Why is he doing what he's doing in the film? But the first up, it's told to you in this terrible exposition scene, and then, like, again, you really don't do a lot with it. Like, it's done in that one scene and then on to the next thing. That's kind of the nature of this film. And while we're on the subject, oh my god. Actually, you know what? No. We'll stick to positives. The acting from our main three characters, Light, Elle the detective after him, and Mia, his girlfriend, I think are actually all pretty solid. Mia is by far the most positive thing in this movie. She's the best part. But the other two are really not bad. At first I wasn't crazy about the castings, but there's some interesting ideas at play. And the way they change the two characters, I think could really be used pretty good. Unfortunately, again, the movie doesn't focus on anything long enough to really do anything with it. What about the demon who gave Light the Death Note, Ryuk? Barely in it. He comes in and out. Nothing he ever does or says influences the film. He's just kind of there to be creepy and Willem Dafoe-y. He really doesn't add anything to it. And while we're on the subject, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that really could go in interesting directions. Kira is basically killing dictators and stuff all over the world, so the world is worshipping him, right? Well, apart from bringing that up in just a couple scenes, that's about it. Elle, the detective after him. If you don't know, Elle is like this really beloved anime character. Has one weird expositional backstory scene, and that's really about it. Like, this movie, and you don't know, I wish we went into Mia more. Like, this movie is just so all over the place and so trying to cram so much into one shot that at its core, it really can't be anything. Like, the thing is that there's just no time in it to be anything. It tries to have these grisly horror scenes, but there's like 3 of them, and they really don't fit with the rest of the film. It's trying to be psychological, but to be psychological, you need to settle down, focus, and spend a lot of time on characters, not constantly go back and forth to different plot elements. It tries to be a cat and mouse game between Elle and Light, but again, that's very rushed and doesn't really do much. At its core, this is not a terrible film. I think by far it is sadly the best anime, westernized, big screen, whatever adaptation of an anime thus far. But yeah, no, there's better versions of Death Note to be made. There's better things to do with these stories and these characters. At its core, Death Note is worth checking out. It's not boring. It's not terrible. It's just not really anything, and considering how big the source material is, it deserves more. But we'll talk about that later in the week. For now, tell me what you thought of this movie. I'm sure some people out there found it interesting. I don't know how, but there's always one. Tell me that below, and as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and we'll see you in part 2.